Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about artistic pain and the effort and sweat and tears that go into being able to build your skills up to a satisfactory point. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist on the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 25 years now, and I'm here to empower you. So, 25 years ago, I struggled a lot. It was a struggle that lasted about 2 years, 2 or 3 years, uh, but it didn't go away. It just eased, right? So there's this. So what happens is you, as an artist, you want to start drawing, right? You want to start getting better. You want to get to a certain point, like a professional point. When I was in when I was starting out, I there was the goal was let me get hired at a studio, and what steps do I need to do to get hired at a studio? And then what happened was that I found out what the goals were. I found out what I needed to do to get it done, and then I started doing the things needed to get it done, which meant going to figure drawing, and improving my skills. The problem is that when you start practicing, when you start improving your skills, even when you take classes and you start really honing in on stuff like that, it's a slow process. And it all depends on your mindset, and it all depends on how you're able to assimilate what you're being told, how much you practice well, and then it's just the painstaking doing of the thing. It doesn't just happen because you did it once. You have to do it so much. You have to practice over and over. It's not one of those things where, like, here's the thing and then you get an A. No, with art, that's not how it works. You have to do it over and over and over and over and over and over and over forever, for the rest of your life. There's no point where it stops. Once you start, you can't stop. Like, that's the whole point. That's the whole thing. That's what I mean by I got to I got to the point 3 years after, and it still kept going. So, and it's still going. So the pain was real. Like, okay, so really quickly, when I first started out, I was surrounded by artists who were better than me. The problem with being somebody who has drawing talent, which is not a thing, is that when you draw and your skill is better than other people because you bothered and they didn't, right? The you tend to be better because you do it and other people don't. But then you have this idea that because you can do it and other people can't, because you're comparing yourself to people who don't or can't, you think that somehow that makes you magic, right? And people think you're magic, and so it just keeps it's a cyclical thing where you think you're magic because people tell you you're magic, but then when you are in a situation where everybody's magic, when everybody draws because everybody around you bothered, and then suddenly you realize where you stand in the hierarchy, right? Where you are on the mountain of art. So, in the same way that paradise is a mountain, so is this. It's a good analogy for drawing, right? Building your drawing skills. You're on a mountain, and there are people above you on the mountain going up higher to the skill cap that's way up high over the mountain, over the clouds. You never get to the top of the mountain. You just keep climbing up the mountain. And then there is the people below you on the mountain. And then there are people who are not even on the mountain because they didn't bother, right? So the people in the bottom of the mountain, right, they are not as skilled as you are. And when you discover you're on the mountain, then you discover where you are on the mountain, right? You know where that there are people above you and there's people below you. And then that is called humility. You finally find that you have the humbling experience of knowing where you stand, right? And so the idea is that you're trying to be ambitious enough to continue up the mountain. But the problem is, especially at the beginning of the mountain, is that there's more jaggedy rocks down there than there are a little bit higher on the mountain. Or rather, your feet are not soft enough, right? Like you have, let's say you're barefooted and you're going up the mountain and there's nothing really all that sharp but your feet are soft. And the people up higher on the mountain have climbed up so much and have gone so much higher that they have calluses, right? And they're basically wearing shoes at this point because their calluses have grown. So it's that sort of thing where you're going up the mountain, and the more you struggle and the more you go up, the more you build up calluses. So the idea here is that there is a struggle. So when I first started, I found myself on the mountain. I found myself I was given the perspective of what it's like to be on this mountain. And it was extremely humbling and frustrating because I realized that I wasn't nearly as good as the people who were better than me. And it didn't matter that there were people that weren't as good as me because the people who were better than me were way better than me. So, and they seemed to have an easier time. So, they would show up into the room and everybody would fawn over them, and it would be very frustrating because I put in what I thought was work. But when you realize where you are on the mountain, and then when you see people who are better than you in the same room, you don't know how much more work those people put in. Some people they don't put that much work in, and then they just develop faster. Granted, that's something that does happen. But then there are people like myself who have to really, really work, and so it gets very frustrating. And so what you can do, there's two choices that you have at that point. You could either just leave the mountain, just stop climbing, and just sit. Right? And they say, I'm not going to go any further, I can't. Or you could do the more difficult thing, which is start climbing up the mountain really, really slowly. And that is what I ended up choosing to do. And it sucked. Like, it sucked. Like, no, I would put in months of work and I would just be climbing up a little bit. And I remember just going home and crying because it was so tough. And but you have to just keep climbing. Like it's just like you can't stop. You have to keep going. Like I'm getting choked up because I'm putting myself back in that headspace where I was back then. And it sucked. But you have to keep on going, and you have to have people that go, okay, you know what, this is the thing. This is you gotta keep going. You can't just stop. So So you do. That's the thing. Like you do. You have to. Like you can't just because it hurts and just because it's hard, doesn't mean you stop. you got to recognize that you're going to develop as fast as you're going to develop. And that's the most frustrating part of all to accept, is that you're only going to develop as fast as you can. And you can't compare yourself to the development of other people. And it also depends on who you're talking to, as far as how you're learning, because a lot of the time you may have a bad teacher, or you may not have a teacher at all, and that's another thing. It's more difficult still, by the way, if you have a goal in a timeline, because you think that it has to happen within a time. And that was part of the frustration that I was having, was that I had a timeline that I wanted to get. I wanted to be have a job by this point, and if it didn't happen, that was part of the problem. That was part of the problem. Just giving yourself the pressure of having be done by a certain point. On the other hand, that was a good type of pressure, because it forced me to work. Because otherwise, I would say, it would take me 10 years instead of the 1 year or 3 years that it took, right? Because I would just not have that pressure. But it was really difficult, especially at the beginning when you're still getting the calluses. Eventually, you go through the breaking point. Eventually, there is a point where you break through and you just go into more competent professional level stuff. And then once you get to that point, you recognize the pattern, and that's the big revelation. That's the moment where you. I used to run cross country in high school. That's when you hit the wall, right? Like when you're running and you hit the wall and you're like, bam, and then there's no way that you can possibly go beyond that point. But you do. You pass the wall and you keep going. That's what happens artistically as well. You hit the wall, you can't get past it, and then you pass it. And when you do that for the first time, or the second time, or any time that you actually do that and you recognize that it happened, finally you recognize that it happened, then every single time you struggle from that point on, when you are consciously aware of that struggle, and you consciously become aware of that, then it becomes easier. And the reason why not because the struggle is easier, but because you recognize the pattern. You recognize the struggle pattern. You recognize that once you start to struggle, it means you're going to improve. And then all you have to do is look forward to that wall breaking moment. And then you get the euphoria, and then you go back to struggling again. So, and that's the pattern. Struggle, 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 break the wall. Struggle, 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 break the wall. Every single time. You don't stop struggling. You just recognize and accept the struggle. But at first, it's the worst, because you're not used to it. You don't recognize it. You don't understand it. And you have a goal, for example, becoming a professional, getting hired at a studio or something like that. And if it's not happening, it's the worst, right? So that's and then even once you're in the studio, there's still that struggle. Like every day I struggle, every single day. Is this what the director wants? Is this what's needed? Am I dropping the ball? Am I being too lazy? How can I? It's like all the stuff, like especially when you're getting critiqued over your work. It's like, why did I do that? Why didn't I do that? Why was I thinking this way? Why did I miss that? It's like all that stuff. It doesn't get any easier. So if you can't get past the very initial parts where you're on your knees crying, but you go on anyway, if you don't get past that point, then Once you get into a position where you're a professional, it doesn't go away, but you get stronger. You're able to handle it because you've done it. You've gone through that struggle. You've gone through that initial wall, that initial part. That's where people give up. They just don't have the grit, right? They just don't have the grit to get past that point. And sadly, with the AI mining models, people keep mining the art from these AI programs, and then they have that feeling of accomplishment because they managed to write in the right coordinates for a really pretty picture, and then they feel accomplished, and you never build the calluses. You never build the strength to go up the mountain. Now everybody gets so now it's like there's the mountain. People go slightly up the mountain, and then somebody gives them a VR goggles to make them feel as if they keep climbing up the mountain, when they're still in the same place, but now they just think they're up the mountain because now you got VR goggles, showing you that you climbed up the mountain. There, it's pretend, right? And you get the same feeling of elation, that as if you've accomplished something when really you're not going up the mountain at all. So you don't want to do that. You want to actually have the strength. You want to build the muscle, right? You want to build the calluses on your feet to be climbing up the mountain. And that requires struggle. That actually requires you to be crying and suffering, and it sucks. You got to do it though. There's no other choice except to give up or put on the virtual goggles and pretend you climbed up the mountain, right? But you didn't. And you never will as long as you just keep putting the goggles on. So that's my take on artistic struggle. Hopefully this has been helpful. Like I seriously, it wasn't easy, and it's still not easy. And I'm saying this because I'm not the best. There are people who are so much better than me. I keep going up the mountain. The drawing stuff doesn't come easy for me. It doesn't come easy for me. I have to practice a lot. I got to do a lot. Like other people, for them, it comes a little bit easier. But for me, it doesn't. I have to really analyze everything that I do. It's one of the reasons why I could break things down a little bit easier and explain things to people a little bit easier. It helps. The benefit of that is because I have to of having to struggle as much as I have, is that I could explain it to people because I had to figure it out myself in a way that my brain could understand it. So I could break it up into tiny pieces. While I found that people who are naturally that intuit things a little bit faster, they can't explain anything they do because it's just intuitive for them. They just do it, and then they don't know what they did. I had a class with two teachers, and they were co-teaching, and one was a natural, was just natural at being awesome. He was such a good artist, but it just came natural to him, while the other person was not as good, nowhere near as good. But he was still professional, and his work still worked. It was very interesting because the guy that was able to naturally do it faster and better and easier couldn't explain anything that he did, like I just said. But the other guy, it was a brilliant teacher. Like he was able to explain it all because he had to struggle through it. And I'm like, this guy, I understand that guy. Like I get it. Like I know that part. Like that, I have to do that. Some people, they don't. And so and the people who don't, that comes naturally a lot of the time, they hit the wall and they don't know what to do because they never struggled. And so they hit the wall higher up the mountain, and then they end up either giving up or staying stagnant because they can't improve. So it's interesting, but again, the struggle is going to be there no matter what, and it's doing just going through it and recognizing that it's painful. All right, so hopefully that's helpful. I was trying to stop this video earlier, but let me know what you think. What's your struggle? I'd like to hear it. And let me know if this is helpful, and I will talk to you next time. All right, bye. So I'm happy to announce that I now have a new drawing lesson called Drafu Guide to Sketching and Gesture Foundations. It's the beginning of the level 2 information that people have been asking me for the drawing website, which will teach you where to start drawing, what to draw when you draw, how to draw from observation, how to draw from imagination, how to draw what you envision, and how to discover what you ought to envision if you don't have anything specific in mind. So if you find any of this interesting, you could follow the link that you see, or you can go to thedrawingwebsite.com, look under level 2, and you'll find a link there.